Welcome into the Hook'em Hoops podcast. Zach Davis joined alongside Jason Conander and especially joined alongside Clark Kellogg, the NBA all rookie first team player, now CBS college basketball analyst. Mr. Kellogg, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Zach, Jason, great to hang out with you, man. It's always fun to talk hoops. And as we're just on the cusp of conference play ramping up, my juices are flowing, guys. I'm excited about what's going to unfold over the next several months.
I got to say really quick, the coolest thing about this podcast for me, I've been a big Clark Kellogg fan for a while, watching college basketball on TV, but this is a voice that is synonymous with my childhood from NBA 2K. I mean, this is awesome.
Yeah, I've been part of that franchise, guys, for 15 years. Kevin Harlan and I and a bunch of the other announcers that you hear, but that's been a wonderful addition to the portfolio. I've had great fun doing it, and obviously the game is terrific. I'm not a gamer, but those who play it tell me it's one of the better sports games out there, and the popularity of it continues to amaze me, and I'm glad to be part of it.
So we'll just jump right into it. This is a Texas basketball podcast. We talk Texas, we talk SEC. The SEC is the best conference in the country, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I want to talk Texas first. The big story is Trey Johnson. Have you watched him yet this year? And if so, what are your thoughts on what you've seen from the freshman?
Very impressed by him. I've not seen him in person, but I've watched a couple of games. Actually, I watched in total the Ohio State game and the UConn game, both losses for Texas, the only two losses they've had, as they've beat everybody else on the schedule. And those are teams that I thought they would beat. And UConn and Ohio State obviously got wins against them because of slow starts. But that young man is extremely impressive. He's got a full repertoire of offensive game. And what I like most about him is his motor. He plays hard at both ends of the floor. I mean, he takes pride in trying to defend. He takes pride in trying to make the right play. And offensively, he's a pro. I mean, he makes pro shots every game. Shots where he's challenged, shots where he's contested, shots where he has to get into his shot with a couple of dribbles and moves that the highest level players in the world make. So he's a special talent, seems like a terrific kid from a distance, but I've been impressed with his full repertoire and his motor. Love his intensity and his competitive spirit as a young player.
As we preview the SEC, I know we're going to talk about it in a more broad standpoint right now, but Ken Palm has Texas finishing 8-10 in the SEC. Should Texas fans be worried if they were under 500 come March?
I don't think so. I mean, that league is so good. I've probably seen 12 of the 16 teams play at least a game. There are a few teams I've not seen yet, just have seen some highlights, but I've got a pretty good handle on a dozen teams, and they're all tournament caliber teams. I mean, 3 of your 5 undefeated teams as we speak are in the SEC, and Florida is terrific. I think Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, those teams to me have been uber impressive. And then the rest of the league, Vanderbilt, much improved. Missouri, going to be a problem for teams. Texas A&M plays a style that's extremely difficult to handle if you don't take care of the ball and have good guards and playmakers. So that league, top to bottom, as good a league as I've seen in terms of quality throughout. Top teams that could win the national championship, teams in the middle that could get to the second weekend of the tournament or beyond. And then your bottom teams are all going to be in the conversation, I think, for potential tournament participation. So I'm actually excited to see how this thing is going to shake out. 8-10 in that league. I kind of looked at Texas's schedule. They get a good number of the heavyweight teams at home. I think Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, but they get a number. I mean, every team is good, but they get a number of the heavyweights at home, which should help, and hopefully they improve. And 8-10 would be tournament worthy as I sit here today. I don't see how it wouldn't be.
With the SEC, the thing that stands out to me with these teams is just the depth. I mean, the talent, whether it be freshmen, some of the transfers who are on their second or third stop, you need depth to win in this conference. And Texas is going to learn that really quickly. Who are some of the pieces not named Trey Johnson who you think need to step up in order for Texas to have a successful first year in the SEC? Maybe Arthur Kaluma, Jordan Pope. Who are some names that come to mind?
I think Pope clearly because he runs the show a bit. Anytime you're talking about having success, you've got to have consistent play in the backcourt. I think Tremont Mark is another guy because he's capable, he's experienced. He's had a little bit of an injury bug here in the last couple of years, but I really liked him as a freshman when he was at Houston. Then he transferred, had some injuries, but he's got tremendous upside and ability. But I think those guys, probably Kaluma, a very experienced, talented wing. The key to me, guys, when you're talking about having a successful team, you mentioned it, depth. That's important. But your really good players, your best players, your rotational players have to consistently play at close to their level. In other words, Trey Johnson is an all-league caliber player. He's a player of the year caliber player in the league. He's only a freshman, but he has to play consistently close to his best level. Arthur Kaluma is he's an all-league caliber guy. Now, whether he's all-league second team, third team, that he's an all-league caliber guy. He can't be inconsistent in his play. And you need your role players, but your best guys, the guys you're counting on, have to be consistently close to their best level. And then the other guys, they are able to play their role more effectively there. You can't expect a role player to be an all-league guy. So to me, it's more about the guys that are expected to carry the weight, doing it consistently so that the role players then can have a comfort level in doing the things that they're capable of without trying to do too much.
You know, all the guys you just mentioned weren't on the Texas team last year. You know, Ronnie Terry brought in 10 new guys from the roster. Yep. How hard in his second year, just how hard do you think that is to put that all together?
Well, I tell you what, it's not uncommon. It's actually par for the course across the landscape. You take a look at teams across the country, and you very rarely see teams with multiple holdover players. It's just where we are, guys, in terms of the transfer portal. And the COVID year expires this year, so you've got a number of factors contributing to what's happening in terms of trying, but it's difficult. To answer your question, it's challenging because you have to try to get alignment in a short period of time when you've not had a chance to establish that repetition and reinforcement of culture and roles and style. So you're doing that on the fly. So you need high character guys who will commit early on to winning above everything else. And that's hard to do when you build players into your program over a period of time, let alone when they're just showing up for a year or two. So it's one of the great challenges that coaches face in this day and age.
We'll get into the SEC as a conference after this question, but I want to go back to something Zach asked earlier. He brought up a good point with the Ken Pom prediction and if Texas fans should be worried about that. What would be a good benchmark for them to hit in order to feel safe about making the tournament? Because they don't have that marquee non-conference win before the conference slate.
Well, to me, it's all about handling what you can handle and what's within your ability to control. They play in a great league. They will have multiple opportunities to show their worthiness for the tournament. They just have to win enough of those games. And I don't know what that number is. I think 8 would be more than enough, but you don't do this in a silo. You don't do this alone. You got to take a look at what happens with other teams that might be comparable to you at that point in time. But I think on the surface, 8 wins against the teams they're going to play against. They got to win against North Carolina and State out of conference. Who knows how they're going to fare as the season goes on. But you're right. They'll have multiple opportunities, though, to prove that they're worthy. And, again, we saw it last year, guys. There were 5 or 6 teams that made the NCAA tournament that were not going to get in that large bid. And that squeezed 4 or 5 teams that were marginal and on the stoop, as I like to say, So a circumstance like that could squeeze a team that looks like they're worthy of being in the tournament. You got to win enough of the games against the good teams you play so that you don't put yourself in that position. So I can't give you a number.
Pivot. I guess we can stay on the whole SEC, like staying on the whole topic. Who's the favorite? Who do you think has the best chance to win?
Well, again, I haven't taken a look at everybody's schedule. I'll just base this on observation and the quality of the personnel, coaching, and those elements. Still a lot of runway for these teams to grow and get better. But Florida, to me, is extremely impressive. They've got guards that are terrific. Elijah Martin, Richard, and Walter Clayton Jr. is playing like a first-team All-America right now. They've got size. They've got depth. They play a style where they can beat you up inside, and they also can hit you with the 3-ball and transition scores. They're a well-balanced team. Auburn has tremendous personnel and depth. They've got perhaps the player of the year in the country right now, Janai Broome. Pettiford is fantastic as one of the elite neon newbies out there. And they've got tremendous role players. So Auburn, Tennessee, Florida, I would probably group right now as the favorites, with Kentucky lurking because they've got a group that seems to have come together quite nicely. Their experience, they may not shine and look as good as those other teams, but they're clearly just as capable.
You mentioned Walter Clayton as a potential first-team All-American. It feels like some of the absolute top candidates for the Player of the Year award are all in the SEC. Janai Broome and Clayton and some of the other players. Wade Taylor looked fantastic on Saturday against Purdue.
He sure did. Yep.
Who's the best player in this conference? Who do you think is going to be the most remembered player from the SEC this year?
That's a tough one, Jason. I mean, come on now. There's so many outstanding players. As a matter of fact, trying to fill out who's going to be all league. I think it's going to come down to consistency of performance, and then big moments is going to determine who wins, who gets to the top as a team. I think could tilt the Player of the Year award in favor of that player that's on the team that wins the league. I mean, there are a number of guys. Hey, Chaz Lanier is playing great at Tennessee. I mean, terrific. I mean, off to a phenomenal start, shooting the ball the way he is. And he's got a mid-range game. He's got a 3-point game. He's physical. I mean, there are just so many outstanding players. Janai Broome, to me, is the Player of the Year in the country leading candidate now. By a whisker over Cooper Flagg. I think Cam Jones would probably be in that conversation as well at Marquette. One or two other guys. But I think it's Janai Broome right now. He's been consistent, and he's had some monster moments against high-quality competition. So I would give him the edge right now, which means if he's Player of the Year in the country, then he would be the favorite to be Player of the Year in the conference right now, in my mind.
Are there any teams that are a little under the radar that should be getting more attention that you think in the SEC? Some sleepers?
Oh, man. I think Missouri's interesting to keep an eye on. Dennis Gates. I don't think they won a game in the league last year, right?
Yeah.
I don't think they won a game, and now they look like they could be a real problem. But, they beat Kansas. The way they defend, he's got pretty good depth. My goodness. I've not seen LSU yet. I've not watched them tip to finish. So I need to take a look at them. I think Ole Miss, I saw them a bit early on. They've got one of the best coaches in the country in Beard. So they're a team that I think bears watching. The team that I would really highlight is Vanderbilt. I watched them play a couple of games. I saw them lose to Drake in the multi-team event tournament they played in, and I was very impressed by their squad. I really like their pieces. I like their style of play. I think that would be a team that may outpunch its expectations as far as the conference race goes.
All right. Just going to have to lay it on thick. How many teams in this conference make the tournament?
Well, we've got 16. We've got 16 total, right? I would be comfortable with that right now. But again, this is all based on the quality of the teams and not considering what might happen outside of the league. But clearly, it seems as though they're in that record territory potentially of 11 when we had in the Big East, I think it was several years ago when we got 11. They clearly, again, just based on what I've seen, the quality of these teams, double digits seems very much in the realm of probability.
If I told you if you told me 5 years ago that the SEC would be this dominant, I would have called you crazy. And I feel
Yeah.
like a part of that is the reason the SEC is developing so much as far as an overall conference is because of the NIL and all the money in the conference.
Yeah.
So do you think because of the whole NIL and where it's trending that the SEC is just going to be dominating not just football now, but also basketball?
I think that's a factor. I do think there's another component when Commissioner Mike Slive, the late Mike Slive, really made a concentrated effort to emphasize and upgrade basketball from a scheduling standpoint, from a coaches in the league standpoint, to really put some meat and muscle behind raising the level of SEC basketball. I think that's been a huge catalyst, and it takes time for that type of tilling of the soil to produce fruit. And now you're beginning to see it. That's 6, 8, 9 years in the making, perhaps a little more. And then you factor in NIL, which obviously is a component. And now when you have success, players that are coming along that are elite level players are looking at these institutions as places where they can realize their dreams in college and potentially going on to the next level. So I think there are a number of things that feed on themselves, but I would put a lot of stock in the emphasis that Commissioner Slive and Commissioner Sankey now have made in upgrading basketball, how you schedule, and then obviously the quality of your coaches and players is what really makes you a consistently strong league. And the SEC is doing it as well as anybody, and perhaps better than all leagues this year in terms of what they're producing. The non-conference record, I was just looking at, I think it's like 88% winning percentage when you look at the aggregate record, 144-20. I mean, that's insane. And then everybody's got at least a 2-game winning streak right now, other than LSU, and they just lost their last game. But everybody else in the conference has won at least 2 games. And then you've got the 3 undefeated teams. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to get our research department at CBS on it to see if there's been a period like this in the conference. I know the Big 12 has been really good. The Big 10 in the past, the ACC has had some dominant years, but man, I don't know if there's been any more dominant non-conference stretch than what we've seen from the SEC this year.
Yeah, I think the stat is that the collective winning percentage of all the schools, like if you were to add up their records combined and calculate the winning percentage, it's the highest of any conference ever at this point.
Oh, wow. That makes sense. I don't have a problem believing that. I mean, 88% is insane. I mean, when you think about it, and the way they dominated the challenge. I mean, yeah, it's been dominant. It's been impressive. And now it's going to be fun to see how they rock 'em, sock 'em with each other. That's going to be fun to see what transpires over the next several months in these intense conference battles on home courts of the opposition. Nothing like conference play.
Can't beat that. Last question I've got for you. SEC, you said that you're so excited to see how this plays out on their conference courts. Best conference in the country right now. Best conference maybe ever at this point of the season. What are you going to be watching for the most? What is one thing that people at home should be keeping an eye on in the SEC once conference play tips off?
I think how do you handle I mean, it's the same thing. How do you play on the road? Can you win on the road? Can you find ways to win on the road? Who's going to be able to win on the road? That to me is always an indicator of championship caliber teams in conference play, especially with its conference this strong and some of the home environments that you have to deal with. I think being able to win on the road is going to be a separator. It always is, but I think even more so with the competitive balance and strength of the conference this year. The road teams, winning on the road is going to mean a little more this year than perhaps it has meant even in past years.
All right, life on the line. Who are you picking to win it all right now?
Right now, pick to win the national championship?
SEC and national championship, yeah.
Oh, I have no clue. I have no clue.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't even begin to venture a guess. There are so many unranked teams that look like they could win a conference championship. I mean, Clemson is really good. They could get to the Final Four. I mean, Memphis is really good. I know they're ranked, but I'm looking at Baylor outside of the top 25. They've got room to grow. Who else I have? I love this Drake team. They're undefeated. A bunch of Division II guys from Northwest Missouri State with a new coach, player style. They got a great point guard. Bennett Sturts is legit. Will be a Cousy Award candidate. I mean, Houston is falling from where it was ranked early on. That team is still a dangerous squad. So yeah, it's going to be another fun, exciting ride. But I couldn't even venture to. And I will say this though, Zach and Jason, do not discount the UConn Huskies. The championship culture of that program, the leadership of its coach, and they've got enough talent to get better and make a run at a third championship.
Clark Kellogg, thank you so much for joining us for our SEC basketball preview. It is such an exciting time of the year, just a couple weeks away from conference play tipping off